Here's everything we know about the NVIDIA AI PM interview process. This interview process is unique because, unlike other PM loops at companies where you're asked product design or analytics questions or moving metrics, this is basically going to be two types of questions in every single round in their entire interview process: past work history, behavioral-based questions, and questions about their domain that the team is focused in. We have a very specific way we recommend prepping for this, which we'll get to in a minute. NVIDIA is a team-dependent process. What that means is the interviewers you're interviewing with at NVIDIA would be the teammates that you have if you get the job. And they don't need to have a question bank. There doesn't seem to be a question bank of any sort. It doesn't seem to be very structured. They just ask you about the stuff that they know will be very relevant if you get this job. NVIDIA pays top of market, probably tier one for tech companies. And it takes a very long time to hear back. So we've heard of candidates who have taken up to 8 or 9 months to get an offer after starting the process. That's very long for tech, and plan your interviews accordingly. Let's go through the interview entire process at a high level and then go through the rounds one by one. First round, hiring manager, no recruiter screen. Next round, final round that has 4 rounds within it. Those 4 rounds are going to be 4 stakeholders that you're going to interact with the most if you get the job. Again, very, very practical. Now, because all these 5 rounds are basically just going to be behavioral and domain questions, here's how we recommend prepping. Imagine a Venn diagram. On the right is understanding the domain. On the left is unpacking your work history. And in the middle is the sweet spot where you want to find the stuff that's the most relevant to their domain. So then you can lead with it and then pepper in those details throughout the entire round. When we say lead with it, the best practice that we're aware of is having your personal pitch be hyper relevant to this domain. If you want to be, really safe, every word that comes out of your mouth is going to be relevant to this domain. And even the type of stakeholder that you're interfacing with, let's say it's a researcher, they just want to know, do you understand researchers? So you can include a line or two about your experience with researchers in that personal pitch and check that box really early on. How to actually go about that, right? I'm understanding their domain. Start with their engineering blog. They've got a great engineering blog. Most AI PMs at NVIDIA are going to be working in inference, data, or training. Let's use data as an example. Their AI suite of products is called NeMo. So if you go on their engineering blog, search in the search bar for NeMo, you're going to get a bunch of very relevant blogs that you can read about and dive into. They even have some architecture diagrams on those blogs, which are going to be very helpful for you later. Also, you can ask, ChatGPT what NVIDIA does in this domain. Do anything that's going to help you understand how they do the work in this domain. Then unpack your work history at a very, very detailed level. We would recommend all projects in the last 5 years, you unpack to the point of you're ready to answer questions about what metric were you measuring on that project from 5 years ago. If you can do that, you're going to notice the stuff that's the most relevant to their domain that you've done, and that's going to let you show them how to help them. So again, just focus on that and you'll do a really good job. Another theme for NVIDIA is their interviewers tend to be very conversational. It can feel more like a regular conversation and less like an interview. And again, this is kind of along with the unstructured, non-question bank, practical theme of their interview process. Plan on adjusting for that kind of style. Okay, now going through each of the interview rounds. Again, team dependent, so there can be some variance, but let's say hiring manager first, then the final round, PM round, engineering round, researcher round, hiring manager round. So just for the hiring manager, let's say that, again, you're interviewing with a team in NeMo. So they might just ask you questions that are super relevant to their space, like, hey, what's your experience doing data curation for LLM training pipelines? Or even more broadly, what do you know about data curation for LLM training pipelines? Another one is, hey, what's your experience in data strategy? Or another one like, what do you know about data strategy? One unique thing about NVIDIA is that it is a very flat organization. So even though it's a hiring manager round, it could be a very high-ranking person like a director or a VP. That's totally normal, all good. Next, let's go through these final rounds one by one. So first off, let's go engineering. These tend to go in 2 different ways. The first way, you have some cool name brand experience on your resume, and the interviewer is going to look at that. And so the interviewer is going to say, hey, tell me about this really obviously relevant project you did at this really cool AI company and walk me through the systems that you built there and the stuff that you worked on. If you don't have that cool name brand experience, and that's totally normal, a lot of us don't, they're going to ask you to design something. Again, that would be very practical to the work you would be doing on this team. Either way, if you did understand the company's domain really well earlier, let's say you went through those architecture diagrams. That helps in this engineering round so much because if you're designing a system, you can use ideas that they're going to be familiar with. And if you're not, if you're just talking about your past work history, you can use that as a reference point for the way that your company did their version of the stuff that they were working on in the same domain. Next round, PM. It's going to be, again, just behavioral and domain focused questions. Pretty typically in a few different categories, normal for PM rounds. You're definitely going to get asked about the products that you've worked on. You're definitely going to get asked about trade-offs, prioritization, stakeholder management. And the next round that you can plan on, the final round, is if it makes sense for this team and the way it's set up, researcher. So, again, they could ask you very, very, very specific questions for the metrics you were trying to move on those projects from 5 years ago. So maybe that information is not fresh in your mind, so you want to have it fresh in your mind. Lastly, this hiring manager round is going to be very different from the pre-final round hiring manager round. This one in the final round is more of a kind of wrap-up / pre-sell call. Wrap-up because they're like, hey, how was the interview process? So what was your experience like? Secondarily, it's a pre-sell because if you did a good job, they're going to engage you in the sell process and give you that offer. So they're kind of moving towards that and asking you about what questions you have for them, maybe asking you about concerns, maybe asking you about other interview processes to start moving the needle so they can close you if they do extend an offer. So that is basically it. If you want to ace that NVIDIA AI PM round, really understand this team's domain, really go deep, and as well, same thing for your past work history. Really understand the details. Really go deep on all the projects from the last 5 years, but focus the most on the projects that have the most relevant domain to the team that you're interviewing with at NVIDIA. That's it. See you next time.